She walked out of the store, barely holding back tears, not because of the jewelry, but because of the way she was treated. She was the wife of the most famous man in America. Yet in that moment, she felt like nobody. The next morning, her husband, Elvis Presley, made a single phone call. And for everyone who had seen her the day before, a new chapter began. The late afternoon sun slanted low over Graceland's manicured lawns, turning the ivy along the veranda into molten gold. Inside, the house was filled with an unusual hush. Not the restful stillness of a home at peace, but a taut, expectant quiet that settled over every room like a held breath. Elvis moved through the corridors, his steps soft on the thick carpets, and paused outside Priscilla's sitting room. Through the half-open door, he could hear her voice, low and controlled, as she spoke on the telephone. He lingered only a moment before slipping inside. Priscilla sat by the bay window, the last rays of sunlight illuminating her profile. In her hand, she held a fashion magazine and a list of jewelry boutiques she'd clipped out. A simple wish list of symbols, tokens to say thank you for his return to the stage. She folded the paper with a practiced effortlessness, but the tremor in her fingers betrayed her nerves. Wordlessly, he leaned against the doorframe. She looked up, surprised, then offered him a small smile. Worn, tentative. "Hey," she said, "you're home early." He nodded, crossing to stand beside her. His dark suit jacket was draped carelessly over his arm, the crisp white shirt beneath still bearing the faint smell of leftover studio lights and guitar polish. "Tough afternoon?" he asked quietly. Priscilla exhaled. "I wanted to." She gestured to the magazine and scraps of paper piled on the table. "I wanted to surprise you. Something small, but I thought, after all this time away." Her voice failed, and she turned back to the window, leaving her worry exposed like a cracked teacup. Elvis took the sheets and smoothed them gently. "These are lovely," he said. "But you don't have to." She interrupted with a low laugh, bitter and soft. "I know. But I want to. You came back to us, and I want you to know it mattered." He studied the list. Tiny diamonds set in a swirl, a pendant shaped like a musical note, an understated band of rose gold. All of them beautiful, all expensive, but she had chosen them as though a simple ring could somehow bridge the gulf his absence had carved between them. He cleared his throat tight. "I've been thinking a lot about coming home," he said, "about what this means, not just for me, but for you, for our family." He placed a hand on her shoulder, more comforting than his words could hope to be. "I'm here now." Priscilla's eyes glistened in the growing dusk. She laid her head against his chest, and he let her rest, feeling the thin fabric of her blouse against his heart. For a long moment, they simply stood there, listening to the hush outside, so unlike the roar of an arena, but somehow more urgent, more necessary. The next morning, bright and clear as a polished mirror, Priscilla retrieved her purse from the guest seat of their chauffeured limousine and stepped into the cool marble lobby of La Bijouterie, an exclusive Beverly Hills boutique whose name was whispered in the most refined circles. She'd chosen her outfit with care. A soft wool sweater in dove gray, slim black slacks, simple pearl studs in her ears. Nothing screamed rock star's wife. Everything whispered, blending in. Inside, the boutique smelled of polished wood, fresh lilies, and the faintest hint of lavender sachets tucked among the velvet-lined display cases. Glass counters gleamed beneath crystal chandeliers, and the polished terrazzo floor reflected their lights like fleeting stars. Two saleswomen stood behind the counter in crisp uniforms of dove gray, precisely fitted jackets and narrow skirts that ended just below the knee. Priscilla lingered at the entrance, cataloging every detail. The curve of the glass displays, the shimmer of a diamond tennis bracelet draped over a velvet pillow, the gentle murmur of hushed conversation. She approached the counter and offered her most polite greeting. "Good morning," she said. She kept her voice low, her posture modest. "I'd like to look at your rings, please." The taller of the two women barely glanced up. "Appointment only," she said curtly, readjusting a row of sapphires behind the glass. Her companion, a younger woman with a perfectly coiffed bob, cast Priscilla a suspicious look. Priscilla's throat tightened. "Oh, she corrected herself quickly. "I'm here to purchase a gift." The older woman's eyebrow lifted, sharp as a knife. "For yourself or someone else?" The question was perfunctory, but underneath it flickered a challenge. "Prove your worth." "For someone very special," Priscilla replied, flatteringly. She caught herself meeting the woman's gaze and looked away, summoning a gentle grace. "My husband, he's just returned to performing after a long break. I want something meaningful." The taller saleswoman's lips thinned into a line. "We require a credit reference on items of this caliber," she said. Her voice was careful, polite, her next words delivered in a whisper, as if she were sharing confidential gossip. "We can't extend our services to those without proof of means." Priscilla's chest tightened. "I understand," she said softly, forcing a nod. The silence that followed felt like a guillotine's slow descent. She turned from the counter, her stomach in knots, and walked away before tears could betray her. Outside, the sun glinted against the polished marble of the mall. Priscilla boarded the waiting limousine in near silence, her cheeks pinched and pale. The driver glanced at her through the rearview mirror but said nothing. Priscilla closed her eyes, inhaling deeply, as though trying to swallow the stinging injustice and quiet the whispering indignity of that boutique's indifference. When the limousine glided away, the doors closed on her humiliation and set into motion a ripple that would reach more lives than she, or the indifferent saleswoman, could ever imagine. When the limousine rolled back onto Elvis's private drive that evening, Priscilla was silent in the passenger seat, staring at her reflection in the tinted glass. Her delicate features bore the weight of unspoken embarrassment, and Elvis, at the wheel, watched her in the rearview mirror. For a moment, he considered breaking the silence with a joke, something to lighten the air, but nothing felt appropriate. Inside Graceland, the night was cool and still. The windows were illuminated by the soft glow of lamplight. The house looked, from the outside, like a beacon of warmth. Elvis escorted Priscilla through the hallway, her shoulders stooped, and guided her into their sitting room. He closed the door gently behind them and turned the lights low. "It was awful," she said at last, her voice barely above a whisper. "I felt beneath notice." Elvis sank into one of the wingback chairs by the fireplace and watched as Priscilla took the armchair opposite him. He could see the tension in her knuckles as she folded her hands in her lap. Without a word, he leaned forward, cupped one hand around the small of her back, and drew her nearer. He spoke quietly, deliberately, as though each word carried the force of steel. "You don't deserve that," he said simply. "No one does." Priscilla's lip quivered. "I just wanted to find something special for you. I wanted it to be perfect." Elvis nodded. "Perfect." He let the word hang, then continued. "But He paused, considered. "I want you to know how I feel about you. Not because of any gift, but because of who you are." She blinked back tears. "I've never felt so small," she replied. He closed his eyes briefly, recalling every time in his life someone had dismissed him for the clothes he wore. the accent he spoke with, or the faith in his heart. Now he saw that same arrogance mirrored in the boutique clerk's cold indifference. Rising, he moved across the room and took Priscilla's hand. "No more of that," he said. "Ever." The next morning, while Memphis's summer sun rose over quiet streets, Elvis summoned his personal attorney, Martin Standish, to Graceland. The lawyer arrived, polished and precise in a charcoal suit, to find Elvis seated behind his massive mahogany desk, an unopened letter resting before him. There was no fanfare, no cameras, only the distant hum of air conditioning and the low ticking of a grandfather clock. "Martin," Elvis began, "I need you to do something." Standish set down his leather briefcase, reading the solemnity in Elvis's posture. "Anything," he said. Elvis slid the letter across the desk. It bore the boutique's letterhead, elegant script embossed in silver. "Yesterday, Priscilla was treated like she didn't belong," Elvis said. "That shop needs a new owner." Standish's brow furrowed. "A takeover? Are you certain? That's a major investment." Elvis exhaled, reclining in his chair. "A real king stands by his family," he said, voice even but firm. "And a real businessman recognizes opportunity in disgrace. I want them to wake up this morning knowing their customers will never be the same." For a long moment, Standish studied the blank wall behind Elvis, then met his gaze. "I'll make the calls," he said, voice barely audible. By afternoon, rumors began to ripple through Beverly Hills. The boutique's matriarchal owners, an aging couple known for catering to the jet set, were baffled by Martin Standish's ultimatum. Sell the business to an anonymous buyer by week's end, terms non-negotiable, or face immediate legal action and public exposure. Internally, staff whispered that the mysterious purchaser carried an aura of quiet power, that he offered more money than any celebrity endorsement could muster. In that same time, Elvis and Priscilla met in the mirrored privacy of their ballroom. She leaned against him as dancers of light waltzed across the crystal chandelier above. "Did you really do it?" she asked, half in awe. He pressed his lips to her temple, warm with reassurance. "I did," he said, "because no woman who loves someone as much as you love me should ever feel invisible." Her tears came then, glimmering like dewdrops in the chandelier's refracted glow. Elvis held her close, foreheads touching, as he silently vowed that the man in the mirror was no longer the headline maker, but a husband determined to restore dignity to the woman he adored. That night, under a sky pricked with stars, Graceland's front door stood open, a subtle acknowledgement that some battles are fought not with guns or gold, but with gestures of unwavering devotion, seen only by those who matter most. The following afternoon, cameras lurked discreetly outside Graceland's wrought-iron gates, drawn by a whisper in the press that a grand announcement was imminent. It was the kind of rumor that traveled quickly, faster than any official statement, and held just enough mystery to lure tabloids out of their stupor. Interior designers, charity organizers, and a handful of close friends had already gathered in Elvis's private drawing room, where afternoon sunlight sketched soft patterns on oriental rugs. Priscilla sat beside her husband, hands folded in her lap, her lips pressed into a thin line. The ring, cradled under black velvet, rested on a small silver tray atop a slender mahogany side table. The stone at its center was simple, a perfectly cut solitaire diamond, neither too large nor ostentatious, ensconced in a delicate platinum band. It was precisely the piece she had admired from afar, a symbol she'd once feared beyond reach. "You know," Elvis said gently, addressing the small assembly, "when I first asked for silence on this, I wanted no curtain call, no fanfare, But some moments deserve their own stage, even if that stage is just this room, among friends and family. He paused. His gaze drifted momentarily to Priscilla, capturing both her anticipation and her lingering unease. Priscilla wanted to give me something meaningful. She searched for a piece that would tell me she sees the man behind the myth, the man who fights, sometimes struggles, but always returns to her. I told her she deserved something at least as significant, and I hope she'll accept this, not as a purchase, but as a promise. With that, Elvis reached for the tray and lifted the velvet cover. Priscilla's breath caught as she saw the ring in full light. The diamond sparkled with depths that belied its modest size, reflecting every flicker of lamp and glint of window pane. Around them, the room held a collective hush. Priscilla's eyelids fluttered, and she looked up at her husband, equal parts astonishment and affection shining in her eyes. She rose, her silk dress whispering across the polished floor, and knelt before him. Elvis guided her hand, sliding the ring onto the fourth finger of her left hand. It settled perfectly, as though waiting there for years. A gentle applause followed, first from Priscilla's mother, who had arrived unannounced, then from the handful of guests who recognized that this was more than jewelry. This was a reaffirmation of partnership, a restoration of dignity after a humiliating slight. The boutique owners, long since ousted, were far from this moment. Here, the aisle was lined with the solidarity of those who mattered. At that precise instant, a discreet knock sounded at the door. It was Martin Standish, Elvis's lawyer, carrying an envelope and a small box. "Mr. Presley," he said, voice low, "a telegram arrived for you just now." Elvis nodded, accepting the telegram without breaking his gaze from Priscilla. The lawyer then placed the box in front of another guest, James Thornton, the young clerk who had shown kindness to Priscilla in that Beverly Hills boutique. James looked up in surprise, meeting Elvis's unwavering eyes. "Open it," Elvis prompted. Inside the plain wooden box lay a crisp letter of introduction from Elvis Presley himself, offering James a position as assistant manager of hospitality at Graceland's own hospitality division. The typed words read, "Your courtesy to my wife spoke volumes. I hope you will lend that same grace to others who step through our doors." Thornton's hands trembled as he lifted the letter. He looked at Elvis and then at Priscilla, blinking back emotion. In the hush that followed, no further words were needed. Priscilla squeezed Elvis's hand, and Elvis offered James a nod that carried both gratitude and invitation, an unspoken understanding that goodwill, once extended, transforms lives. The guests lingered a while longer, lingering over tea and reminiscing about happier times, charity events, late-night studio sessions, laughter shared amidst the strains of music. But the ring and the letter had reshaped the atmosphere. What began as a private act of vengeance had become an even more private gesture of generosity. The room no longer buzzed with gossip about power and wealth, but with the warmth of community and the quiet joy of redemption. Long after the guests departed, Elvis and Priscilla remained behind. She slid the ring back and forth on her finger, its weight a reassuring presence. "I'm sorry you had to do that," she murmured. He shook his head gently. "You deserved that night back," he replied. "You deserved to be treated with respect. That ring, it was yours first." They sat together in companionable silence, the afternoon light fading to a rosy dusk. Outside, the Graceland fountain murmured softly, as though acknowledging that love and dignity, once restored, ripple outward in ways even a king cannot predict. And somewhere, across the miles in Beverly Hills, the emptied boutique stood as a reminder. Kindness wields a force greater than any sum of money, and justice, when delivered with compassion, writes its own legacy. one genuine gesture at a time. Dusk had settled over Graceland by the time Elvis Presley and Priscilla stepped onto the back terrace, the sound of the fountain a quiet accompaniment to the cicadas' hum. Inside, the drawing room still bore the afterglow of celebration. Half-empty glasses of sweet tea, a scattering of delicate tea sandwiches, and the faint scent of gardenias from the vases on the mantel. Yet neither Elvis nor Priscilla lingered inside. They needed the open air, a moment unimpeded by guests or cameras, to let what had passed fully sink in. Priscilla paused by the wrought iron railing, turning the platinum band slowly on her finger. The diamond caught the glow of the floodlights below, blinking like a signal in the gathering darkness. Elvis stood a few steps behind her, hands tucked into the pockets of his slacks, watching her with a tenderness that had grown over years of joys and trials. "I never imagined it would feel so right," Priscilla said softly, as if confessing a private truth. "I thought I wanted something shiny. But this means so much more." Elvis crossed the terrace and slipped an arm around her shoulders. "It isn't about the ring," he said, voice low. "It's about what it represents, that you're seen, and that anyone who treats you with anything less than courtesy deserves to be reminded of your worth." He hesitated, as though weighing his next words. "I learned something tonight, too." She leaned into him, her head resting against his chest. "What did you learn?" He took a breath that flickered with the weight of his own revelation. That power is meaningless without kindness. That every person, no matter how small their moment, deserves to be met with respect. He drew back slightly, looking into Priscilla's eyes. "I've spent my life on stages, giving people melodies, but sometimes the simplest act, a letter, a quiet visit, can carry more melody than any song." Below them, the property lights traced the edges of the gardens, the carriage house, and the distant outline of the Graceland gate. Elvis pointed toward the shimmering windows where James Thornton, the young clerk, worked late, organizing guest accommodations. "Look at him," Elvis murmured. "He's not just a helper here now. He's part of the family. He earned that by treating you with basic humanity, and we both saw it." Priscilla nodded, wiping a tear that had escaped down her cheek. "His life will be different because of tonight." Elvis smiled, a soft curve that spoke of relief and hope. "And your life will be different too. I want you to understand that my love for you isn't built on the fame or the fortune. It's built on who you are, even when no one else sees you. That store, that place that judged you, never saw you, but I will always see you." She reached up and traced the outline of the diamond with her fingertip. "Promise me something," she said, voice tinged with vulnerability. "Promise me that whenever I, or anyone, feels small again, you'll remind us." He held her hand, pressing her fingers gently. "I promise," he said. "And more than that, I'll live it every day." They stood together in companionable silence, the night air cool against their skin, the country's chaos and glare of spotlight seeming a world away. Somewhere in Memphis, the after-hours lights of the old Cadillac dealership might still be on, the staff probably whispering about what they'd done and undone. But here, on this terrace, all that mattered was the quiet vow exchanged between husband and wife, between two people whose bond had been tested by circumstance and emerged stronger. Inside, the guests had departed long ago, leaving the house to settle into its familiar hush. The Presleys retreated indoors, the gentle click of the French doors closing behind them, a seal on the night's lessons. In the drawing room, the ring and the letter had been tucked safely away, tokens not of wealth, but of respect and recognition. By morning, word would circulate in the press. Graceland's owner had quietly intervened, reshaped fortunes, and given a second chance to those who deserved it. Headlines might note the surprise ring presentation or speculate on alliances with local businesses, but those who mattered, Priscilla, James Thornton, and the countless lives touched by this act, knew the truth. Greatness lies not in the size of one's fame, but in the compassion one extends in moments when expectation falters and mercy is most needed. And somewhere, tucked into his wallet, Thornton carried Elvis's handwritten note, a daily reminder that simple kindness can echo far beyond a single night. Priscilla, too, would keep the memory alive, recounting to friends and family the night her husband chose to teach rather than chastise, to build rather than break. In the end, that quiet gesture became part of their shared story, an intimate refrain in the melody of their lives. It required no stage lights, no thunderous applause. It needed only two people willing to see each other fully and to act on that vision. And in that simple act of kindness, the Presleys found a deeper harmony than any song could achieve.